Fresh Fiction Podcast is brought to you by REVELL Books and Bethany House, publishers of A Secret to Die For by Lisa Harris. Psychologist Grace Callahan has no idea that she has a secret, one worth killing for. But when she finds out that one of her clients has been murdered, she as quickly realizes that the computer security specialist wasn't simply suffering from paranoia. Detective Nate Quinn has just been cleared for active duty after bombing killed 18 people, including his partner, and left him dealing with PTSD. His first case back on the job involves the murder of Stephen Shaw, and his only lead turns out to be an old friend, Grace Callahan, and her life is in grave danger. Someone believes Shaw gave his psychologist information before he died, information they are willing to kill for. All right, Lisa, that is intense. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thanks so much for having me, and I hope it's that's the point.
That's the point, right? Well, it's interesting because you have always, except for maybe one of your first books, you have always written romantic suspenses.
Well, even when I was just writing straight romance, I would always try to stick in the suspense plot line. And I have to say, my editors, I don't think always like that. And I think it was kind of unexpected for readers who weren't expecting that. But I just couldn't not do that.
Yeah, I imagine. Well, we'll definitely get into that. But I want to go a little bit farther back and have you introduce yourself to our listeners.
Well, I'm Lisa Harris. I started writing about 20 years ago when my son was a baby and I had no car and was stuck at home, and I decided I was going to write a book.
Okay.
So I've been doing that for a long time. We currently live in southern Africa, where we've been for about 15 years. My kids, unfortunately, are spread out all over the world right now and almost grown up, which is kind of hard. But so we've had, quite an adventurous life, living in several different countries. And the wonderful thing about my job is I can write anywhere in the world.
Mm-hmm. So you've been writing for about 20 years and then living overseas for 15. Was writing always sort of what you wanted to do, and then you also did these other things, or was it just that you just couldn't do anything else but write?
Well, I always wanted to be a writer. My mom even says that I used to dictate little stories to her, when I was very small.
I love that.
But it just was something that always got on the back burner. There was just so many other things that were going on, and I don't know, it just didn't seem like a priority, but it was something that I even have handwritten pages when I was probably in junior high, little stories that I, started. So it was definitely something I always wanted to do, but it wasn't until I was kind of stuck at home with my youngest son, and thankfully my oldest son, and he slept all the time. He would take long naps, so I had this extra time, and that's when I started, and I never stopped. So
and you never stopped.
Writing. Yeah.
Were all of your kids as amiable in the sense of like not disturbing you while you were writing, or were they each different from after you started having more?
I have 3 kids, and it turned into pretty much writing in chaos.
Yeah.
I wish I had this picture, but my mom has this picture. She told me that I was sitting at my desk with a baby in my lap and kids and my other 2 crawling on me, and I'm sitting there trying to write. Normally, I didn't ignore them like that. I would write like during nap time and then they would go to bed at night. But and then I ran a daycare for a long time, which was nice because they had friends. And so when everybody was happy, I could kind of sit in the living room and write. And so I definitely got used to writing just with noise and chaos and whatever was going on around me. It's not so easy anymore. I think maybe I'm getting too old. I want a little bit more quiet now. But
yeah. It's hard to quiet your brain when you have so many thoughts going through it, to kind of sit down and focus on just the words.
Definitely, yeah.
Well, it's great because I was going through your website and I see that you also give so many tips, and you're so open with aspiring writers as well as readers. And was that something that was so important to you as you began writing? Did you have mentors that were kind of helping you and supporting you?
Well, and I did, and I think that's one reason why I like to encourage other aspiring writers. When I first started going to a writers group with Lena Nelson Dooley in Dallas, and I just remember the first time I went, I was kind of terrified. I hadn't really told anybody what I was doing. I don't know. I didn't know what I was doing, really. That was probably why. Mm-hmm. And when I got there that first night, and I remember reading my chapter, and they were all like so positive, and then told me to go totally rewrite it.
That's good friends.
But for me, I would much rather somebody say, okay, to be encouraging, but to say this isn't going to cut it. And I learned from that. I learned from them being very nice and loving, but also being very direct and helping me learn. So I started understanding, okay, why things don't work and why I needed to change certain things. My characters were like cardboard, and I'm sure the list was very long. But, so for me, that balance of not being just mean and negative, but also being very direct, because I'd always rather learn and grow. Even now, to this day, I'm in the middle of these huge edits from my editor, and it kind of hurts because you think you had it all perfect when you sent it in, and yet I'm still learning to this day.
That's awesome. And it's good do you still have a good attitude about it too? Like you're open to the suggestions and the guidance that your editors are giving you?
Well, I decided that's their job, so I just have to suck it up, and I learned from it, and I just have to get in there, work hard, and in the end, I know it'll be better.
Absolutely.
So I know it's going to be worth it, even though it's hard.
I know, it's hard. It's because it's kind of like killing your darlings in a way, Like,
it is, yeah. Definitely.
Well, I'm interested because you said earlier on that you've always kind of had a mystery or a suspense element in your books, even when maybe the readers in those early ones weren't really necessarily ready or interested in that. But I'm curious about where your love for mystery and suspense comes from.
Well, I don't know exactly, though. I grew up reading Nancy Drew books and reading all the Victoria Holt books, the goth kind of suspense novels. I was a vivacious reader growing up, and that is really, I guess, what I read. The strange thing is, I don't like any kind of adrenaline rush. I don't like roller coasters. I don't like to be scared. I don't like scary movies. But I love writing it. And I love that. I want people to have to turn the pages and to be scared and, have their heart race and stuff like that. So maybe I can just enjoy all that in the book where I know that I'm in a safe environment. And I know it's going to have a happy ending.
That's good. And that's the nice thing about writing romantic suspense, too, is that you always yes, there's so much chaos and so much craziness going on, but you still have that happily ever after at the end. And you make those characters, they go through so much, but at least they have some sort of relief at the end.
Oh, yes, you have to have a happy ending. Even if not necessarily everything's going to tie up in a perfect little bow, and that's okay, though. Mm-hmm. But definitely have to have that happy ending.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so with A Secret to Die For, which is your newest one, came out at the middle of September. I'm curious for you, what was the inspiration behind the book?
Well, the heroine is a psychologist, and I guess that probably came from the fact that that's what my daughter is studying in school right now.
Oh, okay.
And I started, which is a very interesting career to me, and we talk a lot about it, my daughter and I, and I figured, there's got to be a lot of secrets that are told to a psychologist, and what if one of those secrets was enough to land her in a lot of trouble? Mm-hmm. A secret that was actually somebody was worth killing to make sure that the secret didn't get out. And so that was kind of the idea. I usually have something that starts mulling around in the back of my head, and before I know it, it's a book. So, that's kind of how that started.
So with Grace's story, is she, I know you modeled her profession after your daughter, but does she have any traits similar to your daughter?
I don't ever on purpose make a character be like somebody that I know. Whether I do or not, I don't know, because every once in a while somebody, my mom will say something, well, that sounds like so-and-so, but I never do that on purpose.
Well, I was going to say, I bet the people around you probably see more of that than you do, of course.
Yeah, and you do kind of the things that you see in life, people that you meet, things you see on television, your friends. All of those are going to play into ideas that, come into your mind as that character is developing. I didn't have to use a lot of technical stuff about her career. So, there was some stuff about PTSD, and our family went through an attack a couple of years ago, and so some of that was drawing on personal experiences on how, the after effects of loss and trauma and things like that. Yeah. So, actually, it was probably more on a personal side than it was. Of course, I always do so much research. I kind of get carried away with research, too. Yeah. But
I find that would be my favorite part of writing a book, would be doing all the research.
It is kind of, yeah. And I find myself off way over here. Drag myself back in. Yeah.
Do you ever sit down to research something and then you're like, oh, this is not for this book at all. I have to save it for the next one or something else?
I'm sure, yeah, because I do. Yeah, there's a lot of research that doesn't actually get into the page. Though usually I'm looking for pretty specific information. What I thought is I can spend a lot of time on a sentence. It's one sentence of information that the reader is not even gonna, think, wow, she spent an hour looking for that, looking that up. So most of it probably, but that's what you want. I mean, you don't want there's a whole bunch of facts that are sticking out. You want it just to kind of flow with a little added, interesting information that's kind of weaved into there. So
absolutely. And what's great too, I think exploring PTSD, it's a thing that I think touches every single person's life in some way or another. Everyone's known somebody that's gone through traumas in their lives, and they deal with it in their different varying ways. And I bet you hear from readers, I know the book's only been out for a week, but are you starting to hear from readers that are kind of pinpointing onto that PTSD conversation?
I have had, I just read today, somebody said that they saw that was part of the book, and they go, that's why they had to read it. I don't know what their story is, but I know that these two characters especially, they both had pretty significant losses. She's kind of further along in her healing than he is.
Right.
And, but one of the things that I like seeing them kind of help each other as they, of course, they're in a very intense situation and don't have a lot of time to help each other through it, but there are scattered out conversations, and as readers, and even as writers, we've all experienced loss or trauma or something, and so I think it's something that everybody can relate. And I hope it's interesting as they kind of take this journey toward, not maybe to being healed, but toward a healing in the things that have happened to them in their past.
When you're not writing and you're not researching, you're probably reading and watching movies or TV shows. What are you currently enjoying when you're not? I know you're in the middle of edits, but when you have some time, what are you watching, reading, and listening to right now?
Well, I definitely like reading romantic suspense, thriller type things. I also really like kind of the end of the world type things. I love those kind of movies. I love those kind of books, which kind of, there is a little bit of that in here, in this story, which I found interesting with all the research. I love police procedurals. I watch a lot of those, like as TV shows, and always, I'm always got my little notebook, because something will spark an idea in my head with something that I'm watching. That happens a lot. And I even just one small idea could actually spark a whole book. So I definitely like to write what I watch, what I read.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask you. Are you able to do that while you're writing, or do you like to be I have to read something completely out of my genre when I'm writing romantic suspense?
I can do both. Yeah, I'll often, especially watching the shows, like police procedurals, I just find it very interesting because I do a lot of that, and I know that TV shows are not necessarily accurate. I get that.
Sure.
But still, you still get a lot of ideas, and pretty much I read in the thriller suspense genre for the most part as well. Yeah.
That's awesome. And are you? That was my question. Perfect. Well, Lisa, I'm curious for you okay, sorry, I'm all over the place with my questions. Because we are nearing the end of our time, and I wanted to make sure that you had a chance to let our listeners know where they can stay in touch with you and find out more about you.
Okay, great. I have a website, lisaharriswrites.com. And there's all kinds of information there about my books, even pictures. I love photography, and I have a lot of great animal pictures there from when we go on safari in Africa.
That's so cool.
Stuff about my books, and way to contact me there as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Lisa. I appreciate it. And I know you're in the States right now, but I hope that your travels back to Africa and Mozambique are fun and no stress whatsoever.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Gwen. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Lisa. Have a great rest of your day. Hey guys, it's Gwen. If you love what you hear, there are a few ways you can help us during season 2. First, don't forget to subscribe to the Fresh Fiction Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, and Google Podcasts, or any of your other favorite podcast apps. Rating, reviewing, and sharing the podcast with your friends helps us out more than you'll ever know. Sharing is caring, as they say. You can also find me on Twitter and Instagram as Real Vixen.